The American Health Journal, bringing you the latest information on medicine, psychology, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Major medical advances are made each week, and each week the American Health Journal keeps you up to date.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the American Health Journal. I'm your host, Roger Cooper. In this special edition of the American Health Journal, we'll dedicate the entire show to the leading cause of death among men and women, cardiovascular disease, which affects an estimated 60 million Americans. Today, we have the opportunity of introducing you to Dr. Louis Ignarro, the 1998 Nobel Prize winner in medicine.
When I was in Europe, actually when I was in Naples, Italy, which is where my